We are activating your unique self-discovery one show at a time. The Orchard of Wisdom Self-Discovery podcast are at your fingertips, just waiting to inspire and invite you in discovering just how awesome you really are and how to navigate through life in joy, enrichment, personal abundance, in mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. All the people we bring you are here to serve you on your journey of life. Do enjoy our next show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of An Author's Kiss right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I am your host, Sarah Troy. My guest is Bill VanPatten. He says that language is a very powerful means of expressing of who we are. And after teaching about language for so many years, he loves the freedom of how to use it now through the telling of the stories that both enlightens and entertains reader. As a gay Latino man, he says, my books shed light on two communities that are marginalized and misunderstood, but it also provides great escape to the readers who want to immerse themselves into the lives of others who struggle to find their way in this complex world. His books, looks are deceiving. We're going to be talking about that. Also, he's got many other books, Satan's Tale, A Little Rain, and they're also in Spanish, which I'm not even going to attempt to say. You might not do it well. But, you know, life as a Latina, quite honestly, can be difficult. But as a gay Latino, do you face any different adversities to what you would do if you weren't a Latina? Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me. And hello, everybody out there in the audience. Yeah, you know, because I'm actually half Latino and I don't have those stereotypical, what people consider stereotypical Latino features. I don't get pegged for that right away, but once it comes out that I am, then I can tell some people treat me a little bit differently. Not everybody, but some people. And what's interesting is that I was born and raised in California. Being gay for me has never been an issue. But I grew up in the Bay Area, which is a much more liberal part of California. Now I live in what's called the Central Valley, where all my stories take place. And the Central Valley is much more conservative than the rest of California, at least the coast anyway. And so I'm finding here now that there is just enough homophobia and enough of people concerned about other people's business to make for interesting storytelling that I didn't experience growing up. Yeah, so.
You're seeing the other side of the coin.
Absolutely, I am.
Yeah. And quite honestly, I'm in Canada, but looking, in at the present moment, this conservatism, kind of, you just keep thinking of The Handmaid's Tale. Are you going that way? And, we may laugh and go, ha, ha, ha. But unless somebody, puts a finger in the plug, the dam is leaking. And somebody's got to do something about it. And we need the storytelling that shows the struggles, the diversity, the adversity. We need everybody to be represented. For them, it will be one brush strokes all, and that's it. And we know anybody that is, whether you're gay or whether you're Latino, or whether you are a Black person, whether you're Indian, here, of course, in Canada, it's Native Indian people. Everybody is looking for their own identity, and we want to be seen for who we are, right? And it isn't one size fits all, one stroke fits all. And underneath that, we're all very individual people.
Correct.
And we just don't seem to have the ability to see people beyond a stereotype, right? We can't seem to pull back the veil and go, there's somebody underneath that person you've just judged, or you've just had an opinion on before they've even opened their mouth, or before you've even had a conversation with them. And that judgment is something that's growing exponentially right now, dangerously so.
It is. You're absolutely right. And in this country, in the United States in particular, it is looming so large. It's kind of scary, actually. It's really scary. And it's always been there, but as a country, we've been able to temper it in certain ways. Now it feels like the government, there's no longer government support for the idea of individuals and individuation. It's no. So anyway, but What a topic, Sarah.
I know, I know. One thing that really needs to be said, because we're still seeing, this. When you talk about racism, it's judgism.
Right,
It is.
right,
When you're
right.
talking about, uh, persecution of any particular person because of either sexual orientation, political, or, their nationality or anything else, it's judgment. And where does that judgment come from? Ignorance. And that ignorance is that people don't read anymore. you know, they don't pay attention. They've been so given the bill of sensationalism and headlines that nobody goes to the next level. We need stories told that, even though maybe fictional, or probably a lot factional, that are actually kind of wake up to, hey, there's a human being underneath that.
Right,
Right.
right.
This is a person who's struggling or has a life like us. They just happen to be different in their sexual orientation.
But not only that, but I think that one of the things I strive to do in my writing is not make unidimensional characters. Because one thing I don't like is where Latino characters are always confronted with migration
Mm-hmm.
problems or racism, which
Mm-hmm.
those are facts and those are issues, don't get me wrong. But what about, you know, a story like Resurrection Road where marriage is falling apart? Why isn't there
Mm-hmm.
two Latinos in that story as opposed to two white people in Connecticut, right?
Right.
Um, for example, in A Little Rain, my latest novel, there's a 16-year-old teenager who's gay. His parents are divorced. His father came out. The kid does not know anything about his father and his mother, why they got divorced. His mother kept it from him and so on. But his father was closeted. He was older and closeted, and that old story. So the kid and the father juxtaposed together. The kid's living a different life than his father. But in this story, the teenage boy, it's not a coming of age story or a coming out story, which I'm sick of those two. This is a story about a 16-year-old unreliable narrator who is fooling everybody around him. And
Mm-hmm.
so those of us who are gay, Latino, whatever we are that's different from some mainstream concept, right? Need to embrace our diversity and our own foibles and things
Mm-hmm.
that we engage in and make us as human and as deep and as broad as everybody else. And so in my stories, I like to infuse those kinds of things. So you don't get these one-sided, oh, here's a coming out struggle of a gay teenager. No, not all teenagers struggle to come out. Some of them are, and some of them are quite devious.
Mm-hmm.
Not all we Latino people face racism. They face other things. So what are those things they face? So all those, I want people to be able to identify with the gay and Latino people while they're reading and almost forget they're gay and Latino because they see that human element in them. They can see something in them that they know from somebody else or
Or
themselves.
themselves. It's when you look at something or you read something and say, this could be me.
Right.
This is my struggle as well. Or I really identify with that. Oh gosh, I spoke to someone like that and I didn't realize that it was offensive with what I said, right? So it can be
Right.
educational as well. So, a good book will always leave you with the story marinating, just like a good wine stays with you. You want the story to stay with you, but you also want a few epiphany moments in there where that identification with a character or a situation is something you relate to, because then you, in a way, become part of that story.
Right. Exactly. And that's what's interesting about good literature. I'm not saying I'm a highfalutin writer with great literature. Oh, I'm a decent writer. I'm a good writer. But I mean, good literature, no matter what it is, has a kernel in it that the reader can identify with, or root for the character or want to like that character for some reason, or sometimes characters if they have multiple points of view, right? So you read something like The Lovely Bones, about everybody knows that story by now, about a dead teenage girl who's narrating a story as a dead person.
Mm.
And you read that and you really feel for her and you really watch the struggles of her family, and you kind of get immersed in that story. There are stories like that that transcend the
Mm.
character, where everybody can just leap into the story and become part of it with the author and with the characters.
A lot of people will think, well, if you're writing stories about gay people, it's only for gay people, right?
Right.
And again, it's like when a straight person writes a book, is it only for straight people? It's meant to have all characters in there. It's
Right.
it's you know, this person may be gay, this person may be polka dot, this person may be alien. Really, that doesn't really matter. And it's what their flavor, their characters that they bring to the table is. What are we underneath? What are we underneath this stereotype label? And when you have all those multiple characters in a story, you've actually started writing about communities, real communities, because we are a hodgepodge of everything.
Right. Exactly. A hodgepodge is a good word. And sometimes people like, look at me, I'm a hodgepodge. I mean, I've got so many different parts of me from different parts of this society. I'm not a single person. I mean, or I should say I'm not a particular or singular person. And how many of us are?
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, you know, it's atmospheric when you go into an atmosphere, how it can change the way you feel. You know, we like to be around an atmosphere where we feel we belong, but that doesn't mean gay stays with gay, straight stays with straight, white stays with white, you know, black stays with black. No, it is really based on the aura that somebody is bringing to the table. Do you make people feel comfortable? Do you make them feel seen, no matter what else they are? And that's really, really where the community we want is. It doesn't matter what orientation or anything else you are. What do we all bring to the table that we all can partake from?
Yes. Yes. Here. I agree.
Well, because some people will call that idealism. And, you know, for me, no, I think it's absolutely, totally and utterly achievable. But I think unless we're telling the stories where we actually paint that picture, and I'm always saying to people, you know, the paintbrush is in your hand. You've got a blank canvas. You paint what you want to see, or the kind of life that you want to have. And it's the same when you're writing. It's, you know, writing a book that you want people to come to the table in the reading of it, where anybody from any walk of life can get something out of it.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I also think books should help people who feel marginalized or are marginalized to move more toward the center and figure out ways for themselves to be part of the bigger picture. In my book, Looks at Receiving, that title has multiple meanings. If you read the book, it's for those of you who don't know out there in the audience, it's a mystery. It's the first mystery I've written. It's done very well. It's gotten great reviews. And the main character is my alter ego. His name is Will Christian. He's half Latino like me and gay and out, and that's not a problem for him. And he stumbles across a dead body early on of a young Latino man lying in a field with the buzzards pecking at him. And he gets involved in this murder investigation, and then the bodies start piling up and so on. And what happens is he starts to uncover things about this small Central California town he lives in. And you start to see looks are deceiving. People don't want to show who they are. And he starts a love interest, and he and his new boyfriend, who's also Latino, use a dating app to try to track down this killer who's killing these young Latino men. And through the dating app, you see all these men with these issues. And one of the, I guess, not morals of the story, but one of the themes of the story is, my God, just be who you are. You don't have to hide behind things, right? And so you have this main character and his boyfriend are out and involved in these investigations and living their lives. And you got these other people who are hiding behind a dating app, not even putting their picture on the dating app and so on. And you just say to yourself, boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were just all free, just live our lives the way we need to be, right? So.
Yes. They're, you know, why are they hiding? Why do they feel they can't come to the front? Shame and blame, you know, made to feel less than, right? And, you know, and why do, you know, you see it over and over again, the self-loathing comes in. When the self-loathing comes in, they go and buy these mass weapons and then take a lot of people out. To release their own pain or to put the blame on somebody else because they've been made to feel small. If we do not accept each other for who we are and what we are, and first we have to accept ourselves.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right? We're going to go down that rabbit hole of feeling always ashamed or always blaming someone or always passing judgment and never understanding where's the heart, the soul, and the spirit in the person. You're judging the exterior. or you're judging, the orientation of, but you're not looking at the heart, soul, and spirit of the person and taking that in as a beautiful, divine human being that just happens to be in this particular vehicle, right? And if we don't give people that permission to be themselves, no matter what themselves are, we do go down the road of violence, because that seems to be the next step out of frustration and a lack of feeling belonging.
Right. Not only that, but then you wind up wasting your life. I know
Absolutely.
where I live, there are a lot of older people around here, and some of them are quite bitter and mean. And I look at their lives, and in fact, I wrote a story about this one. It's based on this one lady I know. And the story juxtaposes the narrator, who's been through lots of crap in his life. He follows her around the grocery store, right? And as he watches her, he has these reflections about his life and what happened to him. And his life became something, and he's happy with himself. But somehow this woman, he wonders, what happened to her that she couldn't turn her life around? Why is she so bitter? And so I see that all the time. I see bitter people, and I always ask myself, why are you so bitter? Why? Because, it's like, remember Yoda from Star Wars?
Love Yoda.
Anger leads to hate, hate leads to the dark side. It's kind of like that. It's like,
it is, but it's a very simple statement that actually had such profoundness, because it is utterly true.
Right. And these bitter people, I find, this is my guess, is that it goes back to what you were saying before, Sarah, is they really don't like themselves.
No.
And because they don't like themselves, they project that dislike onto everyone else. And
it's everybody else's responsibility, not theirs.
Exactly. I mean,
everybody else's fault.
People ask me all the time, I go, why are you so optimistic? Why are you so happy? I used to do stand-up comedy. You're full of humor. You seem to have a zest for life. And I go, long time ago, I chose that. I chose that kind of life. And I chose it because I actually learned early on to like myself, and say, hey, I'm a pretty good person, and I've got stuff to offer, and get on board. That's my philosophy.
And you're right. Everything is about choice. Even abstaining from a choice is a choice. And we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose what to do with it.
Right.
And I've interviewed some people where some horrible, horrific things that never should happen to a human being has happened to them. And they could have definitely gone down to the dark side, and kind of, you wouldn't have blamed them. But instead, they chose to go through the process of healing and say, this is what happened to me, but I'm going to change it. This is what happened for me, to discover my strength, to discover my abilities, my skills, to discover how awesome I really am, how strong and abundant I really am. And they've stepped into a person now that is so enriched and enriching to others that it is absolutely beautiful. And they wouldn't have been that person had what happened to them not happened to them, and they hadn't gone through those struggles. We've got to realize that I don't care what happens to you, what manure is dumped in your yard. It's, you can swish it around and make a garden or plant flowers, or you can complain about the stink, right? It's up to you what you do with it.
That's right. That's absolutely, I totally 100% in agreement. No argument.
A lot of people, there's a three-letter word: how do I get out of this? How do I do this? How do I do that? And then I go back to reading, podcasting, listening, partaking. We learn from other people's stories. And even though you're a fictional writer, I know that a great deal of it will come probably from your own experience and observations, right? So a lot of factional in there as well. We learn from those stories, because we can put ourselves into the story and we can feel that we can relate. And then what we can do from there is, okay, I'm going to use the touch of that same courage or that skill, or I didn't know that, I could apply that. So a book not only can be fun and enlightening, but it can really be educational as well.
Yes. Yep. Yes, it can be. It can be. But I'm wondering now if people, I think you touched on this earlier, Sarah, how much people are reading these days and how much people actually get books in their hands, whether they're a hard copy book or whether it's Kindle or on some kind of device, right? I just don't know how much I have a good friend here in my town that I work with. We're on a board together. She reads constantly. She just reads, and she reads all my manuscripts because she loves my writing. She goes, I want to read your draft when you're done. I go, okay. And she's a voracious reader, and she's like the only one I know around her who does. I'm thinking, okay.
I know.
Who else is reading?
You may have to order your book because that seems to be the trend. I think one of the biggest problems, again, observation of 10 years doing this and also being a spiritual counselor beforehand, we're too much in a hurry chasing an illusion that we don't know how to be present and realize the gift is in the moment. And if you are constantly chasing something that society has dictated you to be, you're going to be forever chasing. But if you can be in the moment and realize what you've got right now, presently, you realize how enriched you really are. And then you take that enrichment forward with it. But then fortunately, people have been told, you've got to work 24 hours a day. You've got to go for it. You've got to suffer. You've got to rah, rah, rah. And we've lost them. They're kind of off in the matrix somewhere now, trying to find their way back to the present. And that is because we've been sold a bill of goods that was a whole load of crap. And people just don't know how to be present anymore and enjoy the moment.
Right. And I'm a goal-oriented person in the sense that that's how I can write, because you've got to be self-disciplined and so on. But I always tell people there's a difference between goal-oriented and goal-obsessed.
Yes.
And so people need to stop being goal-obsessed and goal-oriented. Goal-oriented means you've got some desire, you'd like to get something done, and you're going to work toward it. But you're not so driven by it that it consumes you, right? Everybody should have dreams and goals and aspirations. That's part of the human nature, right? But you can't let those take over you.
Right.
And you can't let other people tell you what your goals and desires and aspirations should be. I taught university for decades before I left and became a full-time writer. I was a very successful academic. And a lot of the undergrads would reach out to me, my students, and I would do informal counseling. And one thing I learned with these kids, these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, was how many of them were in school and college and doing what their parents were telling them to do. And I would tell them, you don't like your major, change it. Oh, but my parents think I should have something to fall back on. I go, no, the only thing you need to fall back on is your own happiness. Find something you like doing, truly like doing, and then be as good as you can at that. That's your only job as a student and as a human being.
Right. A very good piece of advice.
And so I see a lot of these kids, because I always tell my colleagues and the teachers who used to work under me in the university, don't forget that we're not here just to teach. We're also here to help these teenagers learn how to become adults. We're sort of like the parents away from home, because these are now adults. They're 18-year-olds. They're of majority age, and they're part on their own now because they're sent away to college. And so that's a really formative age. College is a really important time for people. So I always reminded people, don't forget, these are human beings you got in your class, but not just students. And you've got to help them along the way toward adulthood. That's what part of it's about.
Well, whether you're teaching them to write or to paint, just thinking back to the canvas analogy, you can have a canvas in front of you, but if you don't know which paints or, of a certain amount of structures, a certain amount of basics that you need to know, then what you're going to have there is, kind of scribble. When you're taught that this is that, and this can do this, and this can do that, when you apply that, then when the paintbrush is in your hand, you allow whatever's in you and through you to go onto that canvas without dictation. Now you truly have a piece of art. So the education that you're receiving is giving you the tools and the skills in which to apply to something that is so exuberating to you that then becomes your happiness, because you can actually achieve it because you've been preparing for it.
Yep.
We've got to really look at our educational system. And I think, well, one of the things is, as far as, reading more is, you've got, we talked earlier about your social media and you only have Facebook. And nowadays there's Instagram and TikTok, and people are running their businesses from that. And I think, well, what kind of business are you running that has to capture people's interest in 10 seconds? And that's it, right? What are you selling that it only takes 10 seconds to attract someone's attention? And how much of a hook have you actually got into them when the next rabbit or squirrel is going by and another 10 seconds over there? Social media and social media really has dumbed us down in many, many ways. And we're constantly looking for instant gratification. And if we actually kind of curled up in a chair, glass of wine, coffee by our side, and a lovely cold windy day, and pick up a book and just immerse yourself into it, I guarantee you're going to get more out of that book than you are going to get out of 100 interactions on social media, because you're not interacting if you're on Snapchat or this or that. It's like this, that, etc. You're not even conversing with people.
No.
Right?
No.
And it's kind of that subliminal brainwashing that's going on. That needs to change, and people need to realize I'm empty. Well, why am I empty? Because I'm not going any further than the surface level. I need to open up a few more doors and investigate, read a lot more books, listen to a lot more stories, really get in and participate in my own life, right? And not wait for life to come to me and just be a sensation for 10 seconds.
Yes, yes. Yes, I also blame MTV from the 80s. Remember MTV?
Yes. Why MTV? It was all about music, was it?
They're 3-minute music videos where everything was an image for 5 seconds, an image for 10 seconds, image for 5 seconds. And that's when, to me, it's when it all started.
Right. Yes, it could be. Yes, definitely. Yeah, because, even when we used to go to the movies and they had the shorts beforehand, those shorts could be 10, 15 minutes. They would at least still had some content. We're desperately looking for content, and we don't realize it's in a good book. It's in a good conversation. It's in you actually immersing and participating in feeling your own life, right? But again, everybody's looking to the outside and not the inside.
Yes, yes, yes. Maybe there's an inherent fear of self in a lot of people. Like, I'm not afraid of myself. I'm not afraid of my demons. I'm not afraid of my weaknesses, because what I like to do is learn from myself, but I embrace my strengths. And I embrace the good things. So I promote those things and I work on the things I need to work on, right? But a lot of people, I think, are just afraid of themselves. They're afraid to deal with what's inside. And you get into a book, dive into a story, or get away from these action movies and stuff. Get a good human drama movie and get into those characters, just like a good book. Mm-hmm. And you gotta, you have to ask yourself while you're doing that, why am I liking this? Why am I so involved in this story? What's propelling me to keep going here, watching these people on screen or turning the page of this book? Something is speaking to me, right? And that's what I think some people don't want to do. So
right. When you do watch an action thing, it's like they seem to get from one country to the next. Was Scotty around beaming them up? Because it seemed to be the same day, but the 8-hour travel to get there seems to have been completely gone somewhere. And it's like, how did that work? I had somebody on the other day, was an author, and he had written about a kind of a colonel in China wanting to go to America, and it was based on a true story, but he wrote it and set it more in the 90s for a couple of reasons. One, political, he didn't want anyone coming after him, but also if you look back at kind of the 90s or 80s and 70s whodunit type books and movies and things, there was a suspense to them that just grabbed you and held you from one page to the other, where today it seems to be so gadgeted, in the storytelling, or when it comes into the movie, that we're missing that wonderful, where I remember actually reading the Hobbit, And there was one particular scene that was incredibly suspenseful. And I was sitting on my couch on the 13th floor reading this, and suddenly there was a crack of lightning and thunder. And I was reading the suspenseful thing right at the moment. I literally went up in the air and landed on the floor. Right? Because double suspense going on. And it was so exciting. Where is the excitement? Where are we excited? Right? We're not reading those things that allows us to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then ask ourselves the questions. Could I do that? What happened if I got into that situation? What would I do? What have I learned from this? You want those questions to be going on in your head after you've read a good book, right? Because that's what it leaves you with.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And writers, I mean, look at someone like Stephen King or Dean Koontz, who are the masters of horror, quote unquote, right? You don't just get horror from those two guys. Those authors are masters of the human condition.
Layer after layer after layer. Yeah.
Those books are more about scary bumps and thrills. The bumps and thrills and the scary stuff, right, are integral, and they propel things. But it's that the characters and the human nature and what drives people and so on, and the way they both of them put words on a page too. Of course, I mean, they're just great writers. But it's so whether it's sci-fi or horror or mystery, and you know, that's actually one of the comments people made. Tangent here, put a little pat on my own back here. One of the reviewers' comments, I think it was Kirkus Reviews that said this, for Looks Are Deceiving, is that it's very hard to write a whodunit like VanPatten wrote and imbue it with social issues and things you need to think about. And because that's true, mysteries are just about who killed whom and somebody, you know, blah, blah. But anyway, so whether it's mysteries or sci-fi, horror, or any other genre, it's about the people and the characters and the conditions, what propels them and all those kinds of things, right? It's characters always drive stories. They should.
I believe that Stranger Things this weekend crashed Netflix, right? And I've been watching it. I love it. And it is completely about the characters.
Yes.
You know, what as these kids grow up, how they're compelled always to come back together to each other, how they can face anything together and look at each other's individual strengths as individually the orchestra, but with the right conductor, when they come back together, are truly harmonious together. And it is the suspense, but it is the characters you're buying. And whatever happens to any one of them, you're really invested in. And that really is what made that show really successful, is it isn't the creatures or the this and that. That is almost secondary to how these kids are coming together. And I think it's a great example of how, as a community, as a world, we are desperately wanting to find our tribe, come together and belong, where we feel together we can face anything. But there's so much about society is about division, 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 that we're flapping in the wind as singular people, feeling, where is my tribe? Where do I belong? Does anybody accept me for who I am? You know, can I belong somewhere? Or am I too different? And that, I think, is one of the problems at the present moment.
Yeah. Yes, that's very evident if we look around. It's just, it's yeah. And there are some people who found their tribes, but I'm not sure I like the tribes they found.
Yeah, exactly. Are they benefiting you, or are you just there to try, you know, say I've got a tribe, right? You know, the word opinion came to me, you know, as we've become very, very opinionated as especially Westerners. You know, we've really become very, very opinionated. We've got an opinion for everything, and it's generally not good. It's generally very damning and condemning and judgmental again. And it's like, where do you get off with that kind of opinion? Do you know that person's struggles? Do you know their story? Do you know what they've gone through? Do you know who they are as a person?
Right.
Right.
And I always used to tell my students, whenever they use the word opinion or I think, either in class or in writing, I would tell them, the only opinion I care about of yours is the well-informed opinion.
Yeah.
Because there's no longer, it's an opinion, it's a conclusion. And the same thing when you say, I think. I don't want to hear you say, I think. I want you to say, here's my conclusion based on what I've read, what I know, what I've understood. Not here's my opinion. Opinions are a dime a dozen. But
Yeah.
an informed conclusion, which you can call an opinion,
Yeah.
but an informed conclusion where you have done the work to arrive at an opinion is fine. That is legitimate, right? Then we have something to talk about. Otherwise, it's just, who cares what your opinion is? Who cares what I think? Unless it's about something I know and have. So for example, like in my academic life, my field was language acquisition and bilingualism. And, I know quite a deal about that field. And I got paid to have quote unquote opinions, but they weren't opinions. They were reading of a research, conducting my own research, coming to conclusions about things. This is how the mind works. This is how language works, and so on. These are informed opinions, informed conclusions. And so I wished everybody in life could kind of have that sort of academic perspective on what an opinion is.
Yes.
We would be much better off if.
Well, we've got into the world of, sensationalism, fake news. I don't know if you remember the TV series 2010, The Newsroom.
Yes, yes.
Brilliantly written,
Yes.
exquisitely done. And that's kind of when the change was happening, where you couldn't actually articulate really what was happening. And it was like, no, our sponsors don't want this, or their head office doesn't want this, and everything, and now you look at the news. I have to watch the comedic news, the Daily Show with Colbert, to find out what's going on, because it's the only way to take what's being delivered is with a dose of laughter. Otherwise, it's like, what, and it's just, you can't take it anymore. We've lost faith, not only in our government, but in our media, and we've lost faith in ourselves and our communities. And I don't mean religious faith. I mean just faith in the trust of, can I believe you? Where are the facts? I had a story on last week with a major who got caught in an ambush, and he had an ambulance there that they were trying to get out, and they had everything thrown at them. And they ended up shooting back, killing 19 people before they even got back to camp. That made news in America by somebody in Iraq giving the news to someone who went and put it on the news in America before even fact checking. And it ended up with them being dismissed and being held as criminals, and years and years and years to get their day in court. And when they did, it was deemed appropriate behavior, never innocent. And it ended up being the higher up, the colonels, the admirals, and all of that, protecting their own interests instead of protecting their soldiers. And that is the damage wrong information can do. Right? You put out something as your opinion, or it was this, I saw that, therefore it must be, without somebody else's view, somebody else's perspective, somebody else understanding what happened. We get wrong information, we jump on the wrong information, and that becomes the sensationalism and the headlines. And when you go to it, that's not the story at all.
Right. And we see that all the time on social media platforms, for example. And I'm on a board of directors here for my homeowners association, and I'm actually president of the homeowners association. It's a very large association with like 900 something homes. And there's a social media platform that people are on, and the disinformation and misinformation they put out there, rather than just writing to me or a board member and saying, hey, I have a question. No, what they do. And then you get people up in arms and making claims, and you just go, I mean, that's just local, right? Just my little world here that I live in. Then you amplify that, and and it builds, and you see it on a more local level, and then you see on the state level, the national level. You just go, oh my gosh, when are we going to get the point again where we get down to, again, facts, waiting for the information, not putting stuff out until we know something?
No, it doesn't sell. Fear sells. Sensationalism sells. And even if you produce the facts, solid, absolutely deep-rooted, set in gold facts, I don't believe you.
Right. And what's interesting is I write fiction now, but like sometimes I feel like my fiction is more fact than some of the stuff I see on the news or on social media platforms, because at least the stuff I'm writing is about characters with real lives that you can imagine that this actually happened to this person.
Well, that's kind of fiction, right? Fiction with some based fact in there. And that's why it will have such an impact on other people, because it is based on what's going on. It is something they can see around them. It is something they can even say, oh gosh, I've been guilty of that, didn't realize, right? Because we want something to be enlightening as well as entertaining. And if you can come away with something of, God, I had an opinion on that, and that opinion was not based on fact. Now I have the fact on it, so I have a better understanding. Why, we have to take accountability, every single one of us, of how we interact with self and everybody else. And we've got to stop buying the sugar highs and the sensationalism and get back down to having the roundtable conversation, deep rooted, and understand and base decisions on that.
Right. It's like this is an imperfect analogy, Sarah, but I would say we've got to stop having fast food.
Yes.
And we need to sit down and have meals.
Yes. And conversation around the table with those meals, right? Good conversations. We had a round table, and whoever was staying over for dinner, that was the time that we conversed about the day, about anything else. That was the time where everybody spoke about their day, and we had the conversations, and wherever the conversation went. And so my children are very inquisitive, and they love the conversations today. And I think from a conversation, we learn so much about each other. And if, again, have a conversation without persecution or judgment, because even if that person is coming at you from a different angle, perhaps you can show them a different point of view that they can look at, that will open up their whole spectrum a lot more.
Yep. Again, yep, and yep.
So the two books you've got, so one is just coming out, you said,
Yeah, I actually have 3 books published, or 3 novels. One is called Siden's Tale. That was my first one. That won the Cops Featherling Award in 2019 for Best New Voice in Fiction. So I was happy with that. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It's from 2 points of view. The contemporary story is about this guy, Jake, who's fleeing. I lived in West Texas for a while, so I set it in the town of Lubbock where I was living. He's fleeing Lubbock because he was having an affair with a highway patrolman's wife, and he gets caught, and the highway patrolman is out to get him. So he's like sneaking out of town and getting off the highways and on the really back roads of West Texas on his way to who knows where. And while he's fleeing on these back roads, he encounters this old man, almost runs over him in the middle of nowhere. And this guy's got this thing like a pitchfork, and he just looks old and disheveled. And he's trying to figure out where the hell this guy came from. So he feels bad for him. He, pulls his truck over and gives the guy a ride. Lo and behold, the guy, as they start talking, claims to be Poseidon, ruler of all the seas. And so what happens is becomes a buddy picture of this 30-something-year-old Jake and this older man. And Jake has all kinds of issues growing up. He was a foster kid and so on, never really had a dad. And then this older guy who seems to have some weird things about him that Jake can't quite put his finger on. So the odd chapters are the present with them on the road together. And then the even chapters are this old man telling Jake his life story as though he were Poseidon. And so it's a really interesting story. I guess it's like a buddy story, but with 2 different stories, with 2 different narratives at the same time. So it was really a fun book to write. And Jake learns a lot about himself in his 4 days on the road with this guy. And then it ultimately comes to be about friendship and what you would do for someone when confronted with a real crisis. My second book was Looks Are Deceiving. That's the mystery. It takes place in this fictitious town of Manana, California. And then the third one that just came out is A Little Rain. That also has multiple points of view. The 16-year-old kid, his dad, his mother, and then the big dramatic courtroom with the judge. So that's an interesting thing because it's very layered and you get different. It's almost again like 3 or 4 stories in one with different voices narrating at different points. But it really gives you, it's a slow burner psychological peel back of this family that's disintegrating before your eyes,
right?
And
so
why
many families are,
and why it's happened to them, right? And then I've got a new novel coming out this fall. I just got the notes back from my editor, so I was in the hospital for a week and then 3 weeks of recovery, so I haven't done any work in almost 5 weeks. So I'm going to get back to my editor's
Recovery
notes.
is important, love. Recovery is important.
It is. It is. It is. I put off all interviews and stuff. You're my first one since I've been feeling better. But anyway, so that one I'll work on this summer, finish up. It'll go out. Hopefully, it'll be out this fall. And that's kind of a it's kind of like a gay romance, but it's a story of a 30-year-old man who's just so unsure of himself, lacks such confidence, has no idea of his talents, just doesn't, and he can't understand the world around him is rooting for him. He just can't get it because of his own upbringing. And then at his boss's house, he meets the boss's nephew at a dinner party. The book opens up. It's this 18-year-old kid who's the exact opposite. Self-confident, going to head out to Stanford in the fall to do work in neuroscience and biology. He wants to go to med school and cure disease. And this kid is so full of self-confidence and so what he wants. And he's immediately attracted to this older guy and starts and this poor older guy's 30-year-old doesn't know what to do. It's the boss's nephew and so on. So it's got a little layer of humor to it, but also a little layer of pathos because of this haphazard, hapless, sort of bumbling 30-year-old guy. And it has a little bit of tragedy in the end, but also it has a bittersweet, happy ending. That's all I can say. Anyway, so that one will be out sometime this fall. And I got a book of short stories coming out at some point. I got to get to that. And that's a collection of stories that take place in and around the Central Valley of California. So lots of peeling back the layers there.
I can see why you had to retire to write all these books, right? But an observation.
Yes.
30-year-olds. Now, was you being 30 an epiphany year for you?
I don't know if 30 was an epiphany year. I think it was more like when I was in my mid-20s. And kind of goes back to what we were talking about early on. I watched a movie, because I was in graduate school, and I remember struggling with, overcoming all that childhood crap and everything and trying to, put all that stuff aside. And I watched this movie called Autumn Sonata. I don't know if you know it. It's an Ingmar Bergman film with Ingrid Bergman and what was her name? Liv Ullmann, who plays the daughter. And the daughter is 30 years old. And her mother, Ingrid Bergman, is this world-renowned concert pianist. And she's left in her daughter's care, her youngest daughter, who's in her like 20s, who has mental deficiencies. And Liv, in the meantime, the daughter is married and has her own kid. And so she's caring for all these people in her house. And so her mother drops in for a weekend visit on her world tour. And of course, it's all that psychological Ingmar Bergman drama in black and white. And there's the big scene in the kitchen at night when the two women can't sleep and the daughter's confronting the mother about what a terrible mother she was, and this and that. And then Ingrid Bergman delivers that speech. And one of her lines was, I'm paraphrasing, of course, was, for God's sake, when are you going to get over this? You are 30 years old. Your life is what you make it. It's not what I've made it. What a line. That resonated so much with me. That was my turning point as an adult. Right. I watched that and I went, that stuck with me. And that's when I realized, it's not anybody else's life. It's mine. It's not what you did. It's what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Now.
Going what I'm going to do in the future. What happened to you? What happened for you? What you become because of it, right? Yeah, exactly.
So that was my turning point. So, and
it's like in the other book with Meeting Poseidon, I feel we all at some point meet that person at the right moment when we're ready to receive. That person that has that wisdom we're ready to receive in whatever weird or wacky way that puts us on our right path. And it always seems to come at a point where we've either bottomed out, had the cosmic 2x4, backs up against the thing, and it's like, I just don't know which way to go. And then that person is there. You're vulnerable enough to be open enough to receive. And then that person is there with that wisdom, and you're ready to take it. over and over and over again in the shows I've done. People have said, I met this person on a park bench, or I met them in jail, or I met them doing this, I met them doing that. And just the wisdom they gave me at that point pointed me down another road altogether. And we all have that in our lives. If we could just slow down enough to realize there is somebody there who's got the key to the door we're trying to open, right? But we're so busy chasing and rushing that it will take the cosmic 2x4 to flatten you, to slow you down enough to start receiving, which it doesn't have to be.
You know, and I understand now why so many marriages end in divorce, and so many men in particular go through midlife crisis. It's because just haven't dealt with themselves. They just, you know, they get to a certain point and they realize how much is not there.
Yeah.
And then they try to pursue something else in its place. And it's like, well, no, you're just substituting one thing for the other because you didn't follow the path you needed to follow to begin with.
Yeah. So. And they kind of follow almost a different addiction. Oh, this makes me happy. But again, it's the sugar high. You know, it's only going to make you happy for a moment. It's not going to sustain that happiness. Right. And that sustainability, life is an inside out job. I don't care how rich, famous, or powerful you are. If you're not working on the inside, you're just an empty shell. You have to open up your heart for your soul's wisdom to come through, for your spirit to be ignited, for your mind to know what it needs to know when it needs to know it. And if you're carrying around a whole load of garbage from the past, woe is me, this happened to me, oh, I'm the victim. Well, I'm sorry, you'll be perpetually the victim until you stand up and say, hell, you know, I learned I can survive that. I'm strong. I'm this, I'm that, and I can take all of this and go forward, right? Again, our choice.
Yes, and it's I have to deal on a daily basis with a couple of victims around here, in my house, and they're very tiresome. You know,
yes, draining.
I'm going to tell all you victims out there that that's the height of narcissism. If you think you're a victim, it's because you're a narcissist. That's why.
Yes. But I have fantastic trilogy on narcissism, 2 specialists. I learned so much about narcissism and parenting, between narcissism and psychopath, and then 3rd show we broke down narcissism on all the different levels. Highly recommend. If you don't know what a narcissist is, we cover it, and we've all got the capability of being a narcissist.
Well, narcissism in of itself isn't a bad thing because there are degrees of it.
Yes.
And I did a lot of reading and studying this because I wrote a story once, and I wanted to really get in the mind of sociopaths and narcissists. I wanted to know the difference. And I had a whole bookshelf full of books I had plowed through just to write this one story. So everybody has a little degree of narcissism. The problem with narcissism is when it becomes a central part of what you are, and not the peripheral part.
Right. And when it becomes at the cost of everyone else.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I call it the little boy syndrome. You know, when it's somebody that feels so wounded. And, you know, I have a 15-month-old grandson, and, you know, he's experimenting with this and throwing that. And of course, Mama and Papa are still at that lovely stage of, oh, he's so cute. No, don't do that, Roro. And, you know, I'm going, Roro, you know, Grandma, And he looks at me sideways and he tries it again. Don't you do it. And it's like, what will happen? And I simply take the toy away and go, no. And he go, oh, the toy's just gone away. Right. And when I give it back later and he tries throwing it again, and you dare. And they can learn very, very early. They can learn those boundaries of compassion, of caring, of hitting, of gentlety. That is something we have to teach them. It's a guidance thing. And so I think something's happened to some people where they never had that guidance. And as a baby, it's all about me, myself. I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that, and I'm going to whine and cry to get attention because I don't have the words yet. Well, you have some very high profile people that are those tantrum babies that are still trying to get that attention. But unfortunately, it's at the cost of everyone else around them. And that's when it becomes very dangerous.
Yes. It's almost like malignant narcissism. So.
Yeah, very scary. and pretty well actually, I mean, makes for very good, you know, a very good story in a book, you know, in a movie, to have that narcissist, because we do look upon them as the villains. And they do become the villains. You know, when it's everything that you need. I mean, Putin is another one. I want, and I don't care who suffers for it. And that becomes a villain. And but you've got the same thing, I think, when you've got those people that are so bitter and twisted, and life is out to get them. It's a different form of narcissism, isn't it? They're just not going to go out and make everybody suffer for them in a way that crucify, but they're just going to make sure their misery, and they put a dose of misery on everyone else, because how dare you be happy around me.
Absolutely. That's been my experience 100%.
Yeah. Read, folks, read.
Yes.
You know, when you read, you see yourself in there, you see how other characters, how other people came out of a situation, the choices they made to not buy into the misery, but found a solution. There is always, always, always a solution to a problem. If you're willing to turn that Rubik's Cube around in every which way until you get to that answer, you've got to be willing not to look for the 10-second sensation. Oh, no, it's not going to work. And be willing to go for the due diligence of every angle until you have found that answer. And believe me, so much more satisfying, isn't it?
Yeah. Life is something that doesn't happen to you. Life is something you work at.
Yeah. Constantly, to the day you die. And it doesn't have to be slave labor. It could be joyful work. I'm sure the work that you're doing now in writing isn't at all a chore. Oh God, I've got to write a book. It's something that just pick up the pen, or however you do it, and just let it out. It has to come out of you.
That's yes. In fact, I'm champing at the bit, because I've got to get these other editorial things done in these notes I got back from my editor, because I got another story that is so timely I want to work on. And I thought, oh my God, should I just like put everything aside and do this? Because if I don't, this story is going to what's going to happen to this story? So I thought, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the next 2-3 weeks really working hard on those revisions and getting stuff done, so then I can start that story.
And make sure that they kind of don't bleed together, because that can happen, right? It's get it down, get the notes down, revisit them, and or respark, right? Because the worst thing I find is that I get an idea middle of the night, of course, and then wake up in the morning and it's gone. You know?
Nope.
Take notes or something, right by your bed, you can write the idea down or something, right?
That's what my phone is for. Note to self. Note to self.
Exactly. Because you have that profound sentence, like Bergman, profound sentence, you know it's not going to come back to you again. So get it down while it's there. Right? So how do people find the books? How do people find you?
The easiest way to find me is my website. It's very simple. It's my name, Bill VanPatten, spelled BILLVANPATTEN, BillVanPatten.net. You go there, and there's everything you need to find, links to books, links to, there's some free short stories up there if you want to download them and read them at your leisure. They're very short, the kind you can read in like 10 or 15 minutes. And the links to Amazon to purchase books if you want. And then I'm on Facebook, so just type in that name, Bill VanPatten, and you'll find me. Actually, there's 2 Bill VanPattens on Facebook. There's no space in my last name. So capital VAN, capital PATTN, no space. If you put a space in, you're going to get this guy, Bill VanPatten, who's a musician in New York. And he and I became friends on Facebook because of that confusion. We've never met, but we talk to each other because of that confusion. But yeah.
2 different form of artists, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I am on LinkedIn. I don't use it very much. I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me there if you want to. But my website, BillVanPatten.net, also has a contact page. If you want to write to me and ask me questions, send me any queries, you can contact me through that page. So,
and you know, it just like a musician who loves an audience, you know, because that audience feeds them with the right energy, and that brings out the music in them, and then the audience claps in appreciation. It isn't, you know, adulation, it is appreciation. an author would love to hear from you too, you know,
Yes.
about the books that you've read and how it had an impact on you, whether you do it through Facebook or whether you do it through contact. Just, you know, let them know what the book did for you or the books did for you. They're all here on his show page, obviously selfdiscoverymedia.com, and put in Bill VanPatten if you're listening to this down the road, and his whole show page is there. All of his books are there, links to all of them. And you know what? If you're looking what to buy somebody for a birthday, or for Christmas, or for any other time, a book is a great thing. It keeps on giving. That's the thing about a book. It's not like a box of chocolates all gone. It's
Right.
something that keeps on giving, even after you've put the book down. And, you know, I recommend book clubs. I think they're great, as I do podcast clubs of listening to podcasts and having a conversation. So how about read the book, a few of you together, and then listen to the podcast on it, and then get together and have your own conversation. And each one of you has had a different epiphany in that book, and then to share them afterwards. Oh, how juicy is that?
Yes.
Right? How juicy.
And two things as a reminder to everybody out there. It's summer.
Yes.
So one reminder is when you go on vacation, take at least one book with you.
Yes.
Find some time alone, even with your family. Let the kids play on the beach while you sit there in the chair watching and you're reading your book under the umbrella, right?
Yeah.
Or have downtime on family vacation. Everybody does their thing and you get to sit in a corner with your book and read. So read on your summer vacation. Second thing is, when kids are out of school in the summer, get them in the habit early on to read.
Yes.
It's never too early in life to appreciate books. Get them short books, get them small, whatever, or short stories to read, because we know the attention span. Just have them read. So they develop the habit of reading early on. And I think that's one of the best gifts that parents can give kids. So it's summertime, so think about that.
Exactly. Back to my 15-month-old, he's been read almost from the day he was born. And I go and look after him Mondays and Tuesdays right now. And we read 7 books the other day, where he actually snuggled up to me and let me read them to me, because, you know, 15 months, the attention span isn't that there. But
Right.
they're always the same books, which is fine. You know, you just find different ways of reading them. But yes, it opens up their world. It teaches them how to be still. It teaches them how to have wonderment, inquisitiveness. It teaches them how to learn from the books, right? Whether you're looking at a young child or people who have never read and just getting into it, it's that wonderful moment that belongs to you and the story. This is your space, your moment, your now, your interpretation of what you are reading. It's very, very intimate, and allow yourself those intimate times. They're very special.
And it's a good downtime for yourself too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a different form of stimuli, like TV or anything else. It's one that triggers different parts of your brain at the same time, is incredibly calming for the body. So it has some really great mental health benefits and physical health benefits for you folks to snuggle up with a book on a rainy day, a summer day, but just time out for you. Thank you so much for sharing here today, Bill.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I hope everybody enjoys this podcast. And well, I hope our paths cross again soon, Sarah.
Yes, most certainly. Come back with all the next books, most certainly. Especially
right.
that one that's in your head. I want to extract it right now.
It's different. I'll just give you a clue. It's about a 30-something-year-old gay man who takes in a 13-year-old pregnant girl who's running away from her parents.
Ooh, I like that story, because he would understand. Good match. I like it. Come back and share that one, please.
Okay. All right.
And folks, read. You know, if it's just even a question of, you know, what does a gay Hispanic person go through? You know, I'd like to actually understand a little bit more about that. Instead of you pointing fingers and persecuting and passing judgment, how about reading a story that is enlightening, entertaining, intriguing, and at the same time, just going to give you a little education and insight into somebody else's world. It's not just your world you're living in. You're living in a world with a bunch of other people. The more we learn about everybody, the better we are and more harmonious we are as a human race. So until next time, folks, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Find all of our shows on selfdiscoverymedia.com under podcasts or selfdiscoverymedia/shows. And for all our current shows, go to What's New. We are supported by you, the audience. You'll see a nice big shiny blue button for one-time donations or follow us on Patreon, and you will be able to support us there. We enjoy bringing you such wisdom, and the next show will be up in just a moment.